Entonces él nos va a contar algo de sus experiencias en los pocos años que lleva trabajando con ese tema. Él fue un gran colaborador de muchos procesos de trabajo por rehabilitación de fauna silvestre en Colombia y por eso es tan amigo de Colombia. Llevaba 10 años sin visitarlos, pero había estado casi 10 años también trabajando pues de la mano con autoridades ambientales, con zoológicos, con centros de rehabilitación de vida silvestre. Entrenó a muchos de los médicos veterinarios que hoy en día son profesores de veterinaria con vida silvestre en Colombia. Entonces, bienvenido, muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Gracias. Primeramente, lo siento que no puedo presentar mi programa en español, sería muy peligroso. After 10 years of not practicing Spanish, I have found that my vocabulary has gotten a little confused. On Wednesday night, when I intended to say, in addition to caring for birds, we must care for our neighbors, I said that in addition to caring for birds, we must respect the criminals. So there were some things that needed improvement. Basically this afternoon, I want to tell you a story about what started off as a very small organization, 4 volunteers who cared about birds, but specifically about broken birds. Back in 1982, the organization for which I now work was just a dream. And now, 35 years later, those 4 volunteers started something that truly does change the world for birds, for wildlife, for the environment, and especially for people. And I want to share with you how that happened, but specifically during this program, I want you to understand that if you care about birds and you care about conservation, and you don't do anything about that, then it's like the philosophical question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it really make any sound or any noise? My response is, who cares? And the same is true with people who have a deep concern and love of birds, but then don't do anything about it. One of the wonderful things about this festival has been not only to see people taking wonderful photographs and enjoying bird watching, but also to see and learn about and understand the wonderful conservation and especially education programs that are going on. Now, the Wildlife Center of Virginia is currently the largest and leading wildlife hospital in North America. But our mission started back in 1985 when we wrote this statement that we are a hospital teaching the world to care about and care for wildlife and the environment. So we are first and foremost a teaching hospital. We teach professionals, we teach the public, we teach ourselves on a daily basis. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the important thing that needs to be remembered is our mission is giving other people training, capacity, knowledge, scientific evidence to then do what needs to be done to improve the world. Now, we consider ourselves to have a comprehensive conservation program. Obviously, we're a hospital. We care for broken animals, sick, orphaned, diseased animals. We have a very sophisticated program. As we are caring for the animals in our hospital, we are at the same time teaching wildlife veterinarians or veterinarians wishing to become wildlife veterinarians and allowing them to help us in the care of our patients. Currently, we receive 4th-year veterinary students in their last year of professional training from every veterinary school in the United States and Canada, and now I think we are up to 43 other countries. Students and professionals from around the world who come to our facility to train. We also use the stories of the animals as a way to tell people about the consequences of human decisions, about the decisions we make personally on a day-to-day basis, and the implications for wildlife. We play an active role in government policy, in the laws and regulations and agency protocols that affect wildlife. Birds, certainly, but all wildlife, and environment and habitat. You can do all you want for birds, but if they have no place to live, it really makes no difference. We also, and as a part of caring for the birds in our hospital and teaching other people to do the same, we are gathering information. Every single animal that comes through our hospital provides information that gives us a strong foundation for building conservation action. Now, we started with a very, very small beginning. We had 4 volunteers. Nobody was paid. One of the volunteers, a veterinarian. 2 of the volunteers were veterinary technicians, and then I was a former teacher and a conservation activist, but we just sat around having a cup of coffee one Sunday afternoon, and the idea came up. Somebody should do something. And really the veterinarian was complaining that somebody else should do something, not him. And we started off this conversation. At that time, I was working for conservation groups across the United States, helping them start programs. I was a consultant. So I put on my consulting hat and said, here is what you should do. And he responded in a way that I can't repeat in front of a dignified audience, but he suggested that I do it. Well, as we say, testosterone poisoning kicked in, and I started it off. And our first month after we started, we got 5 patients. We were so impressed with ourselves. In the first full year we operated, we had 125 patients in 1 year. That was about a little over 10 per month. Today, it is not unusual for us to receive 125 patients in 1 day. Well, it's unusual, thank God, but it certainly has happened many times. Our first annual budget to do our work took us $14,000 for a whole year. Today, our budget is increased to be more than 100 times that. So today, this much money won't get us very far into the average work week. This was our first sophisticated medical facility. A 100-year-old barn on a farm. This was our sophisticated animal holding facility, at least until the farmer brought the hay and straw in from the field and we had to move the animals to make room for the hay. And this was our sophisticated way of exercising the birds that had gone through medical care. We didn't have big cages, but we used a technique where the rope is attached to a piece of rubber and it's attached to cuffs that fit on the legs of the hawk. You throw it up and then run along, chasing the hawk like a kite. Let's just say we have improved a lot. So we did this for several years, and then we were informed that the farmer was selling the farm. So we got kicked out. So in 1985, we moved very quickly from being that little amateur, non-professional, almost silly little animal care facility into what became the first actual veterinary hospital for wildlife in the United States. The first building to actually be constructed for that purpose. And it was the first time we had paid staff. We started raising more money. We started getting more team members who actually did it for their living. We became active in changing laws, and at that time, even as early as 1985, we began to make a difference because of the information we collected about our individual animals. And that really is the heart of the story I want to share with you this afternoon. Now, our first hospital came, and it looked just like this when it arrived. It had wheels under it, and a big truck brought it. But it was still so much better than the barn. It was clean, it had light, it had heat, it had air conditioning, it had a toilet. And it was a great improvement over where we started. This is an aerial view of our entire campus at that time. It was 1 acre. The hospital is here, the administration offices are here, and all of these are animal cages out behind the building. We eventually added a third building right here. And then we got kicked out after we rented this land from a local organization. They wanted to use it for something else, so 10 years later, we got kicked out again. And finally, in 1995, we decided we were ready to make the big jump. And the big jump involved a $1 million state-of-the-art hospital, an expanded staff, a leap from just working in Virginia and in the United States to working internationally, including, in Latin America, for example. We've now worked in Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Belize, Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, and Paraguay. So that's just part of what we've done. We've now been on site in 22 countries. We started doing wildlife health studies that became very important to us, and then one of the big things that happened was we had a television program on Animal Planet. So when I first came to Colombia, people would see me on Animal Planet every week, the program Emergencia Animal. They saw my face. When they heard my voice, they go, "Oh, you sound so different." Well, when Animal Planet selected an actor to read for my voice, they must have selected Mickey Mouse, because the man whose voice was on Emergencia Animal, he sounded like this. So when people saw me, they said, "You sound very different." It was really, and I learned this by accident. I was actually working in Venezuela one night, had the television on, we were doing a training program, and I was just sort of listening to the TV, and I heard the voice, "El Centro de Fauna Silvestre de Virginia existe, blah, 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 blah." I turned around and looked, it was me. Whoa, what a surprise. In any case, when I first came, I was famous. So everybody wanted to talk to us and meet with us, and it was all great. Now, I'm not famous, I'm a nobody, so thank you very much for being here. It makes me feel better. This is our current facility. This is the hospital we built in 1995. And it's a pretty nice place. I have to say, we're very proud of it. People will ask me if we miss the good old days. Am I nostalgic for the past? Absolutely not. These are the good old days. This is where I want to be. Our hospital is large. It has improved. We have come a long way with our facilities, our library. Our hospital is very complete, very well appointed. And I just realized when I was having trouble with my PowerPoint presentation, it took the one slide and took a whole program and put in here. I didn't know these pictures were in here. So it's quite a surprise. You'll see them again. Here we go. This is our hospital. Let me back up. So we have a state-of-the-art hospital that is equivalent to a veterinary teaching hospital at a university. And in fact, we are better equipped than most universities, or most universities of veterinary medicine. We have every potential technology that can be used to not only fix and repair and heal broken animals, but most importantly, to diagnose what's wrong. The complete diagnostic laboratory enables us to do blood analysis, fecal analysis, urinalysis, tissue analysis, and lately the important things that we're doing are blood chemistries and looking for lead in the blood. We occasionally find diseases that are previously unknown. We've identified several strains of mycoplasma bacteria that are affecting turtles in North America that had never been documented. We also identified a strain of mycoplasma bacteria that was affecting a small bird called a house finch, and it caused an eye infection. The house finches in the United States are an alien species. They are not native to the United States. There were only about 50 to begin with. Someone had them in a cage, they escaped. So all of this species in the United States are related to those 50 birds. So somewhere in there was a problem in their genetics, that their DNA, and they had a vulnerability to this particular bacteria. So we found it in these birds because we had several birds in with the same exact problem. One of our veterinary students noticed it and said, hey, these birds all have the same problem, but none of the other birds in the hospital have it. That led to a nationwide study back in the early 80s, and what happened was that our Department of Agriculture got very upset because poultry, chickens, ducks, turkeys, are all extremely susceptible to this particular type of mycoplasma. So finding it in wildlife potentially prevented it from becoming a problem for agriculture. So this is our campus today. Here's our hospital. And if you remember the 1 acre that was packed so full, this is about 25 acres. And so our hospital is adjacent to a major highway. We have all of this area here for outdoor animal enclosures. We don't fly animals, we don't exercise animals on a rope anymore. So here's a look. We are in a forested area. This was early on. This is an old picture, so there are actually a lot more cages in this area now than when this picture was taken. But the forest land is actually government land, and they give us a permit to use it, and it has been really wonderful. About 4 or 5 years ago, we built what is the largest facility specifically for black bears in North America, and we have, I think so far this year, we have probably received about 25 or 26 bears that come in. Many of them are babies, orphaned babies. We have to raise them for about 1.5 years before they can be released. Some are hit by cars, and a big problem we are having with bears now is a skin parasite called sarcoptic mange. It's a small mite, blood-feeding insect that gets into the skin of the bears, causes them to lose all of their hair. And there's nothing quite as shocking as a bear with no hair. And but we have identified a new treatment, and it now looks like it could be very, very potentially critical for the bear population in our region. Some of our cages are unbelievably large. If you look right here is actually an eagle. This is a huge bird that has a 2-meter wingspan, but he has plenty of room to exercise. Here's another view of this cage. There's the eagle down there. This balcony is actually for orphaned chicks, eagle chicks. We have an artificial nest that goes on this balcony, and the doors will close so that we can have adult eagles exercising in here, the chicks here on the artificial nest being able to understand that they're actually eagles, not parakeets or poodles. So they are fed in the company of eagles. They grow up in captivity, but in the company of eagles, and it has proven to be an extremely successful captive rearing program. And one of the things that helps us with this is that we get an awful lot of birds, so we get to try a lot of things. 70% of our patients, and we get about somewhere between 2,600 and 3,000 animals a year as patients. 70% are birds. These guys, I think, came in because they had a hair problem, but we also get about 25% mammals. Here's one of our little bears. He's not very happy, and he's letting us know. They look really, really cute at this age. This little bear probably weighs about 8 pounds, but I need you to know that 6 pounds of that weight is claws. And this little bear can climb a tree or climb your face just like a cat. So they look cute, but they are not cuddly. So today, we've come so far from those early days. We get over 70,000 wild animals coming in for care today. We have now reached at least 2 million people, mostly children, with our education programs. And today, our training programs in veterinary medicine, veterinary technology, wildlife rehabilitation, and conservation education, there are 4 or 5 in-house programs. We receive about 100 students. And as I say, our vet students come from every vet school in the United States and Canada, and indeed our students of wildlife conservation, wildlife rehabilitation come from all over the world. And we just launched the Wildlife Care Academy about 2 months ago. And this is going to be primarily an online training resource for people anywhere in the world who, at least at this point, can speak English, who want to learn about caring for wildlife, who want to learn about capture and transport of wildlife, various topics, but also themes and topics related to organization management, fundraising, volunteer management, because one of the problems we find all over the world, and we found it here in Colombia, is animal organizations are all operated by animal people. People who like animals better than they like human beings. And there are a lot of problems that go along with that, mainly because animals don't write checks and make contributions. So we have to be sure, if an organization is going to conserve wildlife, that it has a well-rounded capacity to do that. Now, we have right now 22 staff members and education professionals, including all of our administrative team. And we have 6 licensed veterinarians on staff. 5 of them are hands-on with wildlife. 1 of them is involved in our public outreach. Our budget is about $1.5 million a year. We do training consulting with organizations and agencies all over the world. When we were here in Colombia working, we worked with Área Metropolitana, Confinalco, gosh, who else? Policía Ambiental, Cor Antioquia, the Zoológico Santa Fe, and otras organizaciones, other organizations. We really were very, very pleased. And we did training programs for a lot of those groups. In Venezuela, we worked with Guardia Nacional, their Brigada Ambiental, until the commanding general of the Venezuelan army threw me out of the country and invited me to leave immediately. We were there doing a training program for the army that had been requested by the army, but they said, of course, they had no money. So we found the money from private sources, built a training program, wrote a field manual in Spanish for the soldiers of Guardia Nacional. We were there to present the program. And we were 15 minutes before the class started. The auditorium was full, soldiers, bomberos, other emergency personnel. The audience was full 15 minutes before the program starts. I'm outside talking to the colonel, who is the staff officer for the environmental brigade, and here comes a big SUV with black windows, motorcycles, and the license plate said GN1, Guardia Nacional Uno. The commanding general of the Venezuelan army happened to drive by. And for some reason, he thought I looked like a gringo. I don't know why. So he gets on his phone, he calls, I'm talking to this colonel, and the colonel is, "Sí, señor!" And he was just, the color disappeared from his face. The general asked, "Who is that man? Who is that gringo?" And we were in military headquarters, so right where the decisions are made. And he was explaining, and the general cut him off. He says, "Is he an American?" "Yes, General, he's an American." "There is nothing an American has to teach that a Venezuelan soldier needs to learn." That's what the general said. "Get him out." So the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, we were on a plane going back to the United States. So it was, when the army invites you to go home, you go home. So there you go. But now we're doing a lot of things, and this website, I wish I had written it, I lost a W. www.wildlifecenter.org. There is a wealth of information there. And among the things that you can see are live videos of our patients. Occasionally we have videos of the medical procedures as they are happening. So we did an orthopedic surgery on an eagle about 3 weeks ago, and we broadcast it live over the internet for our supporters to be able to see. It's pretty graphic, but it was very, very popular, students and non-professionals alike. Our social media sites are very, very active. We have about 150,000 followers on Facebook, for example. I have to find people who are 14 years old who know how to do that stuff, but it's very, very effective for us. Now, why are we different? Okay, there are lots of rescue centers, there are lots of hospitals, there are lots of veterinary schools, but what makes my organization, our organization, different? Because number one, and I realize, I'm sorry, the animation in here is lost in the computer, but number one, taking care of the animal, the individual animal, is not our primary goal. It's not the main reason our hospital exists. The main reason we exist is we want to know why that animal was hurt in the first place. So yes, we have an animal that comes in, it's got a problem, but if we fix that animal, that bird, that bear, and release it, if the threat is still in the environment, the next animal that comes along is going to be hurt again. We need to cure the problem, not simply treat the symptom. So each patient gives us an opportunity to see things in the world through the eyes of wildlife. That is the important thing. When an animal comes in with a certain type of injury, or if it has an intoxication, which is very frequent, we need to understand not only the medical condition, but how did that animal get the poison? And I'll tell you a lot about that in a moment. But with each case, we are able to use the experience of those animals to help people understand the consequences of their decisions. And one single patient or one single story can have a big impact. Share with you the most popular education story we have that has probably made one of the biggest impacts on the 2 million people we reach. It's the story of an apple. If you're in your car, you're driving along and you're eating an apple, and you get down to the core, to the middle of the apple, most people will roll down the window, push the button, open the window, and throw the apple out on the side of the road. You ask people, why do you do that? Oh, I do it so some animal can enjoy the rest of the apple. Well, okay, that's an idea. Animals do come along and eat those apple cores. But what happens if the animal that smells your apple core is on the other side of the highway? What have you done? You have provided a source that attracts the animal into the highway and potentially causes it to be injured or killed because you really, the truth is, did not want the apple core in your car. So when we talk about that, we talk about the fact that with owls, the most common injury in owls that we receive is they're hit by cars. Well, owls don't eat apple cores, but owls do eat mice, and mice eat apple cores. By throwing that apple core out, you can literally pull the entire food chain onto the highway. And it's something so simple that everybody can do. And when we're talking to children, we can't talk about things like global warming. What is a 10-year-old child going to do about global warming? But every child can be sure that nobody in their family throws food from the windows of their cars. And it's amazing how many times people tell me, adults today say, you know, when I was young, some man came to my school with an owl and told me about apple cores, and we've never thrown an apple core out since. 25 years ago. Well, I was the man. So there you go. But a single patient can have a big impact. Now, one of the story I want to tell you next is about the very first eagle that was ever admitted to the Wildlife Center of Virginia. Now, the bald eagle, or I think the way it translates into Spanish is the white-headed eagle. Okay. Well, that's why I'm doing this in English. So the American bald eagle is very important to us, and it was our symbol of our country for more than 200 years now, but it also became one of the most critically endangered species in North America. In 1985, on a Friday afternoon, after work was finished, these animals never come in during the workday. It's always on the weekend. But we got a call about a bald eagle. And this is the bird. This is the actual photo of the bird that came in 33 years ago, or almost 33 years ago. It was apparently poisoned. It was an adult bald eagle. It was apparently poisoned by an agricultural pesticide. He was found in a farmer's field that had just been plowed and planted. And the farmer had applied lots of chemicals to the field. So one of our state wildlife biologists who worked for our state agency went out, interviewed the farmer, and got a list of all the chemicals, and they identified this one, Furidan, as the chemical that was probably the cause of the issue. The biologist came back with a list of 20 different chemicals: fertilizers, insecticides, fungicides, growth regulators, all sorts of things. When we called one of the universities in Texas that operates a poison control center, emergency phone number for veterinary medicine, when we hit this one on the list, he said, that's it. And what we found was that this was the start of a battle for us that would last almost 20 years. Now, this is a picture of what the stuff looks like. About 4 grains of this is enough to kill an eagle in about 5 minutes. This is highly, highly toxic stuff. It's dangerous even for the farmers. But the problem is, it was the second most popular pesticide being used for corn and soybeans in the entire United States. Millions and millions of pounds of this stuff was being used. We were so naive, we thought, well, we'll call the Environmental Protection Agency and they will fix this. Well, that was a joke. We found out when one of the biologists working for the federal regulatory agency, he tried to fix it and was told, shut up, we're not doing anything. He was very upset, so he started sending me information from the files, and he sent it in secret. And he knew that his agency would never do anything. What we found is that when the chemical was brought to the agency to be registered for sale, the company had lied about the test results. They lied about the impact on migratory birds especially. For example, they were asked to test the impact of their chemical on migratory birds in the southern United States that were getting ready to migrate north. When they stage and gather in large numbers before they begin the migration, they were afraid, the biologists were afraid that this stuff would kill them. The company did a test, and they said no impact on migratory birds. They did the test in August when there were no migratory birds staging for their flight north. They had several other issues. We found in EPA's records, they estimated that that chemical was killing 2 million birds a year in the United States when the farmers used it according to the label instructions. 2 million birds. It's intended to kill little worms in the soil, not birds. But when it's sprinkled on the ground, birds come along and they think it's a seed, or they pick it up to be grit or sand that they use for their digestion. On the market for years, killing 2 million birds a year, but nobody cares about little black birds and little feather spots on the soil because they don't see them. They do care about the American bald eagle. So the battle began. We started collecting information. What we found that after this bird came in testing in the whole state. And we found 6 that had been poisoned, and that is probably just a very small percentage of the actual impact. We also discovered that the laws in our state were so weak that if the federal government didn't act, our state had no authority to act. So our state really wanted to get rid of this stuff, but the laws were so bad that we couldn't do anything about it. And we ended up being able to pressure our state government to change their laws and ban this chemical in Virginia. And within 3 days of when we banned it in Virginia, the company took it off the market in the United States, all over the United States, within 3 days. They volunteered to do that. Well, they tried to tell everybody, oh, it's because we care about the environment. That wasn't it at all. They didn't care about the environment, they didn't care about eagles, they didn't care about birds. What they cared about was their ability to export the chemical to other countries like Colombia, where it was sold outside the United States. Eventually, it took us about 15 more years before we managed to get the federal government to also ban the chemical. So now, it can no longer be manufactured in the United States to sell to other countries, and no other countries that have products with this chemical on it can be imported back to the United States. And that was an unbelievably difficult process, but it all started with one bird. And you think about it, when we finally got this ban, it was 25 years ago. 25 years of that chemical being off the shelf in Virginia means that 50 million birds have not died from that chemical in the United States in the last 25 years. All because, literally because, of one bird. And that is the kind of story that for us keeps us doing what we're doing. Now, the deadly chemical, Furidan, it really made a difference in reducing eagle populations. When we banned it from the state, the eagle population began to rebound. And it really started to come back. And yet, one victory does not win a war. We have had some great success, and in fact, the bald eagle is a great success story in the United States, but all conservation success is very, very fragile. If you win a battle today, you have to protect your victory tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. If we lose a species to extinction, you're done. They're gone. And so one of the things that we try to do is not only declare victory, but monitor the continued success of the birds. And for bald eagles, it's a symbol of the United States, so it's a very, very important thing. But it's also, for us, an important symbol of nature, an important symbol of all bird species, an important symbol, especially for use in the United States, of how we need to remain vigilant. So let me tell you a little bit more about that particular species. So we think about eagles, boy, they represent a lot of things. You know, eagles have been used for thousands of years. The Roman Empire, motorcycles, we've got an eagle. Beer, we have an eagle. My favorite brand of whiskey is Eagle Rare, and so I have a lot of those around the house. Clothing, Army units, the screaming eagles. Well, I hate to tell the Army the eagles don't scream. They sort of cluck like a turkey. But fraternal organizations, social groups, Boy Scouts have the Eagle Scout as their highest award. We have football teams named Eagles, and of course the symbol of the United States. And it's important to us. It's an eagle that's found only in North America, nowhere else in the world. It is a species that's found in most of the United States. The only state in which it's not found is Hawaii. And it is one of the avian species that was first on the endangered species list when that list was created in 1972 in the United States. Historic populations, the United States, relatively speaking, is a young country, but in 1700, the estimates are there were between 300,000 and 500,000 eagles in the United States. And in my area, in the Chesapeake Bay region, we had about 3,000 pairs of eagles in what are now the states of Virginia and Maryland. Well, that population has suffered greatly in the last 300 years. Eagles were shot. Here's an x-ray of an eagle that came to our hospital. Every one of these little white dots is a bullet or a pellet from a shotgun. They had severe habitat loss. The coastal forest, the large pines and hardwoods that are on the tidal rivers along our coast where eagle habitat was prime, those trees have been removed for highways and homes and lumber and environmental threats, and particularly the pesticide DDT. But there were lots and lots of threats. DDT was one of the most, and actually still is, one of the most popular insecticides used around the world. It was developed particularly to treat for mosquitoes and is credited with reducing the spread of malaria in many, many areas. So it did a lot of good, but it has done a lot of bad because, like every other good thing, humans tend to overuse it. The eagle populations in the United States hit the bottom, their low point, in 1963. So from 500,000 pairs of eagles, we dropped to 500 nesting pairs of eagles in the main United States. That's our national bird. We did that to the symbol of our country, and that says a lot. The reproductive rate was that out of every 5 nests, only 1 chick would be produced because the eggs were breaking, the chicks were weak, there were just all kinds of problems. It took 5 pairs of eagles to produce 1 chick, but we only had 500 pairs. So we were getting 100 chicks a year reproduced in the whole United States. And of course, natural attrition, natural death, unnatural death really caused the population to collapse. So major steps in bald eagle recovery were done. We recognized it, we started working on it. And really in the 60s is when it started with stronger enforcement of laws, elimination of chemicals like DDT and Furadan, and really the protection not just of the birds, but of water, of air, of forests, of habitat, critical to the recovery of any species. But the most important thing that changed was public support for conservation. What you're doing here with this festival has a huge potential impact on the future of conservation in Colombia because you are winning public support. The fact that you won the global big day, congratulations by the way. These are things that don't seem to have an immediate impact perhaps, but I promise you everything adds up. So from 1963, when we had 487 pairs of eagles in the whole United States, you can see that the trend has continued up. Now, DDT was banned right in here, 1972. But it wasn't banned because of the impact on eagles. It was banned because researchers found residue of that chemical in 100% of the human tissue samples tested. Every human being who lived in the United States in 1972 still has measurable, detectable levels of this pesticide in their system. It stays there. It accumulates in the fat cells. It accumulates in the system, in the internal organs. Now, in Virginia, where I live, in the eastern United States, we have a very important river called the James River. And our state capital is located on the James River. I live out in this area. But the river used to be the main eagle habitat in all of Virginia. But in 1975, we had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nests. This was the most important habitat in Virginia. We had 7 nests at this point. But when we started making these small victories, getting these chemicals off the market, getting the laws enforced, populations have really started to jump. So by 95, we had gotten a whole lot more eagles there. And by 2015, just 2 years ago, this is a remarkable recovery. But the problem is, and you can see it in this particular map, the density here is low. The density here is very, very high. The population is being pushed out of the coastal area. This is where they traditionally were found because they eat fish. They're being pushed. These areas are full. The habitat has reached its carrying capacity. So the bald eagle is being pushed to the west. The good news is we have eagle populations growing at 10% per year. The bad news is they're now having to find food in areas that they're not programmed to use. So there are many threats today. We continue. We get the big one out of the way, but there are others. Eagles suffer greatly from power line collisions, from electrocution. Certain species, the golden eagle, in the western United States, the leading cause of death for golden eagle is power generation, power transmission. Wind energy, killing lots of eagles, just like a big blender. That the eagle flies along and either hits the turbine, or in many of the cases they have bracing wires that hold the towers up and they fly into those. Oil spills, and we've had our share of those, contaminate the food source, contaminate the environment. When the eagles land in the water to start eating some of this fish, they think, oh great, it's a buffet. They land in the water, the oil gets on their feather. As they clean themselves, they swallow it, and that's the end of the eagle. And it's a serious, serious issue. And it doesn't take much oil. It doesn't take much pollution. And emerging diseases. This is another of the things in which we're very heavily involved. West Nile virus spread across the United States. First detected in the United States in 1998. It's now found in all of our lower 48 states. And it had a terrible impact on bald eagle populations in many areas. And again, not something that they had immunity to fight. And one of the things that involves us is illegal trafficking, and especially the black market in eagle feathers. Very important for Native Americans, but I have to say that Native Americans are the main violators of the laws against trafficking. I'm an expert witness for the United States Department of Justice, and I have testified in, I can't tell you how many criminal cases against people who kill an eagle just to get its feathers. And one of the things we've worked on is establishing a monetary value for an eagle. How much is an eagle worth? Because in our federal criminal system, one of the things that is important to know for the judge to impose a punishment is what was the economic impact of the crime. And until somebody came up with a dollar value for eagles and could prove it in court, people had no consequence. And so you kill an eagle, you'd get a slap on the wrist. And then we got involved, and the slap is a lot harder now than it used to be. We now have established a value for an adult bald eagle of $10,000. And some people don't think that's nearly enough, but we can defend that in court. And in about 30 or 35 cases in which I've now testified, only lost one. And that was the lawyer's fault. That wasn't good. It's now an increasing problem. We're getting more and more eagles that have been hit by cars in collisions with vehicles. Or they're beginning to find other sources of food. If you look very closely right here, can you see what that is? It's a cat. If the neighbors happen to see that eagle grab that cat out of the backyard, I think we've lost their support for conservation. But personally, I think if the eagle grabbed the cat, he's done a great service for conservation, because cats are one of the leading problems, one of the leading threats to birds. It also simply could have been a cat killed by a car. We don't know that. But so we also now are finding that the dumps and landfills, places where trash is disposed, has become a major feeding ground for eagles. And it presents problems with them eating things they can't digest and poisons. It's really difficult. This is a horrible picture of an eagle that was hit by a truck, and he literally came through the windshield. He's still alive. This bird is still alive, fighting and kicking and biting, and I don't know whether he survived this or not, but it's a problem. When they're in the road, they get hit. We get them hit by airplanes very frequently, and that's a big issue. Feeding in the landfill. Here is a young eagle. This is a first-year eagle. He's dead. We removed all of this from his stomach after he had died on the knee crossing. Balloons, plastic, styrofoam. There's a thumbtack from a bulletin board, all picked up by that eagle from human waste. And these are the things, these kind of images we use to help people understand when you are thoughtlessly throwing away your trash, if you don't dispose of it properly, then this is the result that can happen. Now, one of the problems that is now really tragically facing us, and it's exploding, is as these birds move away from the water, they're finding other sources of food, and one of the sources of food they're finding is animals left in the field by hunters. Hunting is extremely popular in the United States. They're not shooting the eagles. The hunters aren't shooting the eagles, but if they kill a deer for food, they open the deer, remove the internal organs, leave those in the field, take the deer home for food. Well, the eagles come along and eat the internal organs, and those organs include tiny, tiny fragments of lead. And that is becoming one of the leading problems now that we are seeing. Now, people say, is this a new problem? It's not necessarily a new problem, but what makes it urgent is we now have the ability to diagnose it. So in 90 seconds in our hospital, we take one drop of an eagle's blood, and we can tell you how many parts per million of lead are in that bird's bloodstream. And it doesn't take very much. This year, so far, we admitted an eagle yesterday that was number 42 for the year for the Wildlife Center of Virginia. 42 eagles have come in this year, and 3 out of 4 of those have measurable lead in their bloodstream. And many of those birds come in and die from the lead poisoning. One of the problems is the lead poisoning is cumulative. If they get a tiny bit this year, but they don't get any more, that tiny bit of lead stays with them until next year. And it builds up, and eventually, over time, it will kill them. And it doesn't take much. A piece of lead from a bullet the size of a grain of rice, that tiny, can kill an eagle in 72 hours. I grew up hunting. I am still a collector of firearms, and I shoot, and I'm an expert on ballistics. I never heard of this. Hunters don't know this is going on, and now our challenge is to educate the hunters who are not wanting to kill eagles, but educate them about the alternatives, because it is entirely preventable. Entirely preventable, because there are forms of ammunition for hunting on the market made of copper that have no problem for animals that might eat it. We are working on bald eagles, of course, but we're working on other species. We're working on black bears, other wildlife species, and it all matters. And what you are doing here matters. And we look forward to re-engaging with the people caring about birds here in Columbia and all over the world. We're doing captive rearing of these birds, and we are proving that these animals raised in captivity, now we're not breeding them in captivity, but we are getting orphan chicks, or if a tree falls down, we can take the chick into captivity, raise it, return it to the wild, treat injuries that it may have if it has hit a power line or been hit by a car. We can then release those birds back into the wild, and indeed we're now putting transmitters on them to follow them after they have been released to see how they are doing. So the transmitter shows us, this is perhaps a 48-hour travel pattern covering about, I think probably in there, about 15 miles a radius of the birds. Biologists used to tell us that raising an eagle in captivity was a waste of time. If the bird doesn't know how to hunt, doesn't know how to feed itself, it's going to go off and die. The ability to feed itself, the ability to find fish, is hardwired into its genetic being. You don't need to teach an eagle to fly. You need to give it the opportunity to fly. You don't need to teach it to find fish. You need to give it the opportunity to do that. And by raising them in captivity, by healing their injuries, we are giving them the opportunity. The biologist who was our biggest critic is the biologist in charge of the tracking program and gives us, or secures for us, the telemetry devices. And above all, public education is the key. If you care about birds, you are on the right track by getting children to care about birds, by getting adults to know birds and care about them. By getting people to understand that caring for birds is truly a benefit, not just because it feels good, but a potential huge economic benefit. And the fact is that we can't quit when we win a battle. We have to keep going. We have to be vigilant. We have to research new problems as they emerge and develop new treatments. And for me, one of my main activities is, this is the United States Capitol, and there I am with two leading members of Congress with my bald eagle on my arm. And I can tell you, a bald eagle is like having a key to every single door in Washington, D.C. Because every politician in Washington, D.C. would slap his grandmother for the chance to have a picture taken with a bald eagle in front of an American flag. So it's amazing, but it works. And public education, I hit on it again and again and again. It is so critical, whether it's in your zoos, whether it's through your organizations for children. The program the other night about the program in the Montessori school, I was so inspired by that. That one young man is a superstar that was on the stage Wednesday night. We'll all end up working for him someday. But it's just amazing. And the thing is, for us, the eagle is a symbol, but it's not just a political symbol. The eagle is an emblem of what we can do in conservation if we care enough in the United States. Our national bird, we nearly wiped it off the face of the earth, but then we finally started to care, and we brought it back. And now, even with the new problems, even with the lead, even with the airplanes and the collisions, the population continues to grow, and indeed we have brought it back. But the future is indeed in our hands. And what comes out of our hands is often important. You'll notice all of the people, as we release this eagle, we have people come from miles and miles around to watch it. Before the bird is released, we tell the story. We tell what caused the problem for the bird. We tell what humans can do to make a difference. I've released hundreds of these birds over the last 35 years. I can tell you, it never gets old. I enjoy every single one, and it changes the lives of people. I have had grown men cry like babies. And one of them was me. So this is our website. Please let us know. There's always a reason to hope. We are a hospital teaching people to care, and I want to acknowledge these fine organizations for their help. So, everyone.